So the game I'm playing today is called Versus Wrecking Crew. Now, if there's one thing that I love doing on this channel, and that I have loved doing for, like, the past 11 years that I've been making Let's Play videos for, is that I just really love showing you guys incredibly obscure crap that no one even remembers, or really even cares about at all. And, well, that's not going to be stopping anytime soon, because the game I'm showing you today is incredibly obscure. Or at least this specific version of the game, I feel, is pretty unknown, because I do feel like a lot of people are more familiar with the console versions of this game than anything else. So if you don't know what Versus Wrecking Crew is, this is an arcade conversion of Wrecking Crew, one of the many launch titles that they put out for the NES back in 1985. It was not a launch title for the Famicom, though, because it was actually released after the Famicom had already been out in Japan. And not only that, but Wrecking Crew was not actually an NES game originally. It was released as an arcade title before it made its way to the Famicom or the NES. And the game's title was probably a giveaway, but in case it wasn't obvious, I am going to be showing off the arcade version of Wrecking Crew today. This game originally came out in arcades back in July of 1984, at least in Japan. This version of the game did make its way to North America as well in September of that year. So regardless of whether or not you lived in Japan or North America at the time, this would have been your first exposure to Wrecking Crew. Because again, neither the Famicom nor the NES port actually existed by this point. That didn't come out until the year after. Wrecking Crew is a fast-paced action game where you play as either Mario or Luigi. This is technically a Mario game because it does have playable Mario characters, and the game even refers to them as such. And the basic premise of this game is that Mario and Luigi have given up their plumbing profession and became construction workers. Each of the brothers is armed with a hammer, and their objective is to destroy a certain amount of walls and ladders within each individual level. Some walls have greater durability than others. You can also use bombs in order to destroy certain objects as well, and I believe using the bombs will actually give you more points because it can actually destroy multiple objects at a time. Of course, you have to avoid enemies in this game as well, enemies that you cannot kill, unfortunately. The enemies in this game take on the form of sentient wrenches. They don't attack you directly, but they usually will be wandering around the entire level, going up and down ladders, and if they touch you, you will die instantly. There's also fireballs that appear from time to time, and you need to avoid those as well. The game definitely plays in a very similar manner to Mario Brothers. It does kind of feel like a spiritual successor to that game, almost. And what I do find interesting is that when Nintendo brought this game to consoles in 1985, they actually added more puzzle game elements to it. The NES version of Wrecking Crew plays more like an action puzzler, where completing the levels, at least in that version of the game, requires a little bit more strategy, because you can wind up in some situations where you can actually get stuck and you won't be able to beat the level. I don't believe you can get into any situations like that in the arcade version, though, considering this version is meant to be, you know, more of a competitive version of Wrecking Crew. As a matter of fact, the arcade version of Wrecking Crew is two-player only. However, if you are just playing by yourself, you do have the option to enable a computer opponent. And as far as I know, there is no way around this. Like, you cannot actually play this game by yourself. If you want to play it solo, you have to enable the computer opponent. It doesn't give you a choice. So the ultimate goal of the arcade version is to just try and score more points than your opponent, pretty much. But if you're playing against the computer opponent, then it's just a matter of trying to get as many points as possible, because the computer opponent cannot actually rack up points at all. At least I don't think they can. Also, I do believe the computer opponent plays as Luigi in this game. So there is no other reason why I'm choosing to cover this game today, other than the fact that this is a pretty unknown version of Wrecking Crew, I would say. Again, I do feel like people are more familiar with the console versions of this game, at least the people who are aware of Wrecking Crew's existence. Wrecking Crew was not one of Nintendo's more successful IPs, not that I know of anyway. But once again, it is another one of Nintendo's obscure IPs that they do still acknowledge from time to time. Wrecking Crew has made several appearances in the Super Smash Bros. Series over the years, and once again, this comes in the form of music. I do believe there was also a stage based on Wrecking Crew that was implemented in one of the Smash games, and the Golden Hammer from the NES version of Wrecking Crew was also included as a collectible item in that game, which makes you invulnerable for a short period of time and does a lot of damage to your opponents. The Golden Hammer I know can be used to kill enemies in the NES version, I'm pretty sure, but it only appears occasionally. I don't believe that it's in the arcade version. I mean, I did play this game a little bit off-screen before recording it. I managed to get all the way up to level 7, and I didn't see the Golden Hammer anywhere. I'm not entirely sure when exactly it starts appearing, or if it even appears at all in this version of the game. I have no idea. I feel like the arcade version of Wrecking Crew hasn't been documented as well as the NES port, so I kind of feel like information on this particular port of the game is kind of lacking at the moment. One thing that I definitely find weird about this version of Wrecking Crew is that apparently the arcade version of this game actually has two separate screens that are running two different instances of the game. Apparently, some of the games that Nintendo released as part of the Nintendo Versus system actually used dual screens, and Wrecking Crew was one of those games. Now, given the way that I'm recording this video, you can only see one screen because I'm only playing on one screen, and I cropped out the other screen on purpose, but I can show you what the game actually looks like, or what it's meant to look like, probably at the end of the video. But apparently the whole point of having two different screens is that player 1 is meant to play on the left screen and player 2 on the right screen? I don't really understand why they couldn't have just designed it so that both players play on the same screen. I don't know, that's kind of bizarre design choice in my opinion. But for the time being, I would like to actually start playing the game, so we are going to insert a credit here. So yeah, you'll see right here, one player versus computer play one screen, please push the 1 button. But then one player versus one player, two players must use both screens. And I'm guessing what they mean by that is that player 1 has to look on their side of the screen and player 2 has to look on their side. Again, I don't understand why they couldn't have just had one screen, because I'm pretty sure there were arcade games back in this time period that had two-player support, but they just had one screen, and two players would just appear on the same screen, but I digress. I mean, I'm pretty sure the arcade version of Mario Bros. Was designed in that exact manner. It could be played with two players, but it only had one screen. But anyway, odd design choices aside, I do actually want to show you how exactly this game plays. Now, I have no idea how many levels are in the arcade version, but I do know that the NES version has 100 levels, apparently. So, what you gotta do here is that you have to try and destroy all of the objects that you see on the screen here, except for the doors, because the doors are indestructible. One thing that you can use the doors for, however, is for letting the enemies move into the background. So you'll notice that some of the enemies on screen here are red, and others are blue. And what that effectively means is that the blue enemies are in the background so that they can't actually hurt you, and the red enemies are in the foreground, which means they can actually injure you. And, actually, I do believe that's the rest of the level. Indeed. Okay. Alright, well then we move on to Phase 2 here. Yeah, so I do believe the actual layouts of the levels are slightly different in this version of the game too, or the levels are designed in a slightly different manner than they are in the NES port. Because from what I can remember, a lot of the levels in the NES version are designed more like puzzles, but for this game in particular, they're just designed like almost like standard platforming levels, kind of like in Mario Brothers. Again, this is clearly meant to be a more competitive version of Wrecking Crew, so I guess it makes sense from that perspective. Anyway, I gotta try and destroy these walls as much as I can. Okay, I think I'm actually boned here. Yeah, okay, well, I mean, there really was no way for me to get out of that predicament there, but yeah, I'm gonna talk about the, this computer opponent right here, because the AI in this game can be a little weird at times, I find. Oh, by the way, you can actually wrap horizontally around the screen. I do actually, want you to take note of that as well. Okay, I'm not going over that way. Yeah, you can wrap horizontally too. I'm pretty sure you can do that in the NES version. Actually, I need to go up. Yeah, take note of the fact that there is a time limit in this game as well, by the way. Oh my god, people, please. You know what? You need to go in the background. Okay, never mind, you're gonna go to the... Why did you turn around? Okay, well anyway, the AI in this game can be a little wonky at times, because you'll see that he sometimes follows, he'll follow you around on certain occasions. Other times he'll just go and do his own thing. Like, more often than not, the computer opponent... Wow, I actually found the coin immediately. Oh, a super bonus. Oh, very, very nice. Okay, good performance there. I literally just guessed, so I didn't even know where it actually placed it. Yeah, that's a bonus level, by the way, that you play every 2 levels that you complete. Here's the bomb. It blows things up. Oh, it also opens the doors as well. Okay, so, yeah, the AI in this game can be weird at times, because more often than not, he will move independently of the player, but there are some occasions where he'll actually copy your exact moves. Yeah, he'll basically follow your every move here, to the point where he's basically overlapping your character, and yeah, he basically doesn't move unless you move, which is really odd. I've had instances where I've been trying to destroy some of these objects here, but then, yeah, the computer opponent over here, you can also knock him down, by the way, as well. But occasionally, instead of moving independently, the AI will instead choose to copy your every move, and then they'll, like, when you're trying to go and destroy one of these walls over here, they'll try to take a swing at the wall as well, and if they end up destroying that wall, then you end up getting knocked off the platform and falling all the way down to the bottom of the level, which can be incredibly annoying at times. Unfortunately, you can't use the bombs to destroy the enemies either. Yeah, so my overall verdict on the AI, he actually just did it right there in case you didn't see that, but yeah, my overall verdict on this AI, works most of the time, but it can exhibit some strange behavior at times. Now that being said, the AI can occasionally be helpful as well, because due to the fact that he can also destroy objects himself, you can basically use him in order to clear out some of the other objects on screen so that you can beat the level a lot quicker. Because as soon as every object on the screen is destroyed, like all of the destructible objects that you need to clear out, then the level will end immediately. And it doesn't matter whether or not you destroyed that object or the AI destroys it. As soon as that object disappears, then that's it. You beat the level. So I'm just gonna try and, actually, I'm gonna take this ladder up here. Yeah, so some ladders can be destroyed and others cannot. The yellow ladders are the ones that cannot be destroyed whatsoever, because I do believe that would actually make the levels pretty much impossible to beat. So I'm just gonna try and destroy these up here. There we go. There's only, like, one other ladder that I need to destroy. Actually, no, there's another wall over here that I had to destroy as well. There we go. I mean, yeah, one thing you can do as well is that you can knock the enemies off the ladders too and knock them down to the ground. So, I mean, you have some way of dealing with the enemies in this game, at least. This version, anyway, since, again, I don't believe the Golden Hammer exists in this part of the game. Right, so we got the bonus stage again, but this time I think we only have 1 coin, because I think we had 2 that we could find in the first round, or like the first bonus game. I'm pretty sure. I don't know, it doesn't matter. I found the coin already. I don't exactly know how these bonus games work, aside from the fact that it hides a coin inside one of the doors and you have to go and find it within the allotted time frame. Okay, what exactly do I want to do here? I mean, I obviously want to get away from this stupid fireball. There we go. You get knocked down. You get knocked down, and please do not get back up again. I hope that you will just stay down, good sir. My goodness. Yeah, so I mean, there's not really anything else to this game other than this. Okay, why were you were going down and then you went back up? Okay, I guess the enemy behavior can also be kind of wonky in this game sometimes, but that's okay. That's totally fine, because I think that's actually that's the final object right there. Yeah, and then the amount of time you have remaining does get converted into points. I don't even know if you have a points counter in the NES version. I only have, like, really vague memories of playing the NES port of this game, because I do know that the NES version was available on the Virtual Console at one point. As with a lot of, like, Nintendo's really old NES releases, this was eventually re-released on other platforms, like the Virtual Console, even though that doesn't exist anymore. I think this was also available on the 3DS at one point. What was interesting about the NES port in particular is that the NES version actually had a level editor. It allowed you to create your own levels. You couldn't save those levels, unfortunately, unless you were playing the Famicom version, because Wrecking Crew was another one of those Famicom games that used a tool called, get fricked in the butthole and die. No, it used a first-party peripheral called the Famicom Data Recorder, which basically allowed you to create custom levels, or in games that had, like, level editors that allowed you to create your own levels, you could save those levels directly to a cassette tape, and I do believe you could write over the cassette tape. Now, of course, that peripheral was never released in, North America. Okay, what am I even... I think the problem here is that I'm destroying the ladders way too quickly. I think oh no, I'm not actually dead yet. Yeah, the only problem with that, of course, was that even though the level editor also existed in the NES version of the game, you cannot actually save any of your levels in that port of the game due to the fact that the data recorder was never released in this region. So that was the only downside. Okay, well, does that still count? Wait a second. Okay, really? I actually cleared the level, but that still didn't count because I died? Okay, that is actual baloney garbage right there. That is some actual garbage. Yeah, so long story short, the game had a level editor, or the NES port did. If you were playing the North American version, you could not actually save any of your levels because the data recorder never came out in North America. So it basically rendered the whole process of saving levels and loading them completely useless. That was also the same issue that the North American version of Excitebike had, and every other game released for the NES that also had a level editor and allowed you to save levels. Why they didn't just remove those features in the NES ports of those games, I don't really know, but yeah, it was like if you wanted to soft lock the game on purpose, that was like a quick-fire way of actually doing that back in that time. Because I do believe if you actually did try, like, saving or loading levels, well, I think if you tried loading levels, it would soft lock the game if you were playing, like, the NES port, like the North American port specifically, due to the fact that it was actually it was essentially waiting for, like, a command from the data recorder, but due to the fact that the data recorder never came out in North America, yeah, it basically soft-locked the whole game and you had to reset the console. I think I actually demonstrated that when I played Excitebike on my channel a few years ago. Anyway, I'm gonna see if I can try to play this just a little bit better here since I keep getting ganged up on by angry wrenches. Please and thank you. Okay, yeah, you just go that way. Yeah, these fireballs are very reminiscent of Mario Brothers as well. Actually, I'm just gonna open that door and I'm gonna pray to God that someone decides to go through it. I don't think anyone did, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Okay, you just get out of here. Yeah, so I mean, aside from the color palette changing occasionally, I don't think there's really that much variety to any of the levels, because I mean, you're still destroying the exact same objects over and over. I do know that some of the walls in the later stages get a lot more, they get a lot sturdier, I guess you could say, or they take a lot more hits to actually destroy. I guess maybe I should keep the destructible ladders here for now, just so that, yeah, these wrenches have a way of going, like, up and down, because I think the reason why I was having such a difficult time avoiding them before was because I already broke all of those ladders. So maybe what I should do instead is maybe just keep them around for a little longer, and then when I have no use for them anymore, then I go and break them. Maybe that would be a better strategy. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, I do believe that these guys will just go up the ladders automatically. Like, they go up and down the ladders automatically. It's like the game forces them to go either up or down the ladders when they come into contact with them, which definitely works out well for me. I mean, out of curiosity, are there any other controls that I can use here? Oh no, it seems like there's two different buttons that do the exact same action, which is just swing the hammer. So, I mean, literally my only attack here is the hammer. Yeah, so, I mean, it's still pretty simple controls. You just have, like, I don't know if if the arcade version of this game had a joystick or not. I actually haven't seen, like a picture of the physical arcade cabinet for Versus Wrecking Crew before. But I mean, this has pretty basic controls other than that, because you move left and right, occasionally go up and down the ladders, and it seems like there's two different buttons that perform the exact same action. Yeah, so quite literally all you're doing here is just swinging a hammer around and breaking things. That seems to be about it for Versus Wrecking Crew. It definitely seems to be pared back compared to the NES port. It seems like with the NES port in particular, they actually... It seems like they actually fleshed out the gameplay a little bit more with the console version, because they turned it into more of a puzzle game. And not only that, but they actually added an item that allows you to just completely destroy the enemies, which I don't understand why they didn't add that in here either. Oh, of course, it's one of the last places I look. Okay, well, either way, I still get points for that. One of the great things that I do remember about the NES version as well is that the NES port actually allowed you to start on whichever level you wanted, similar to what Nintendo did with Ice Climber, which apparently they also made an arcade version of Ice Climber as well. I have no idea why, but that was apparently something Nintendo made at one point. Yeah, and if you're curious as to whether or not any of Nintendo's, like, Versus arcade games were popular or not, they actually were. They were pretty successful when they first debuted. I'm not really sure if Versus Wrecking Crew was one of Nintendo's more successful, like, Versus games, but I do know that there were some games in this particular series that did actually find considerable success in the arcades. I know that Versus Tennis was one of those games, and the whole reason why Nintendo even bothered making, like, arcade versions of their NES titles to begin with was because they wanted to test out whether or not there was a viable market for the NES in North America, which it turns out there absolutely was. Many people's first exposure to NES games in North America would have actually been in the arcades, because a lot of these games did actually debut in North American arcades before they came to the NES. So this was pretty much Nintendo's way of testing out whether or not they should make, like, a North American version of the Famicom, which is exactly what ended up happening. So while it may seem a little bit strange or even pointless for Nintendo to bring some of their NES games to arcades, and I certainly thought that was really weird at first, when I first found out that this was a thing that Nintendo actually did at some point, you need to remember that when these games first came to North America, the NES wasn't even out yet. The only legitimate way that you were able to play these titles in North America back in like 84, 85 was in the arcades. And it turns out that the Versus system was actually a pretty big success for Nintendo, which convinced them to bring their Famicom hardware stateside. The reason why I enjoy covering stuff like this on the channel is because I think it's an interesting bit of video game history that doesn't really get talked about all too much. And I especially enjoy showing off a lot of incredibly obscure stuff from Nintendo in particular, because I mean, Nintendo is arguably the biggest video game company in the entire world, and they also have a bit of a reputation for being a very secretive company as well. There are some arcade titles that Nintendo released several decades ago that they just straight up don't acknowledge that they ever made, like Radar Scope, for instance. Nintendo just loves to act as if Radar Scope just doesn't even exist. So I really do enjoy, from time to time, just like, you know, going back in time and looking at all of the stuff that Nintendo had put out before they became internationally famous, I guess you could say, or before they gained international recognition, because some of the stuff that they put out before Super Mario Brothers, and some of the stuff that they also put out before Donkey Kong even, are genuinely fascinating to me. So that's pretty much the whole reason why I like to cover stuff like this on the channel, even though I know that there's, you know, it is pretty niche, I will admit, and there's probably not a lot of people who are going to, you know, genuinely care for it at the end of the day, but when has that ever mattered to me? The entire premise of my channel has pretty much always been covering weird games that almost no one has played. I mean, to be fair, I have been trying to make an honest effort into covering more games that people have actually heard of in recent years, but I mean, still, like, I still feel like the premise of my channel, for the most part, has not actually changed at all in the past 11 years. Also, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna just end up failing this level anyway, because I'm about to run out of time. I don't actually know if I'm gonna be able to get to those top walls in time. Yeah, I already got to level 7. I still don't see any golden hammer, so I don't even know what's happening anymore. Alright, well, I don't think it even matters anyway, because I'm pretty sure I just ran out of lives. Okay, well, right, well, I think with all that said and done, I do believe I am going to end the video here. Yeah, because I don't believe there is anything else to this particular version of Wrecking Crew. I do kind of wish that I was able to show off the NES version instead, but you know how Nintendo are. with, taking down ROMs. Well, I mean, I think there's pretty much no ROM site on the internet anymore that is still hosting, like, ROMs of NES games, because, I mean, Nintendo have been, like, really cracking down on that kind of stuff in recent years, so it's become way more difficult to find. I just figured that, you know, finding arcade ROMs would be way easier. It turns out some of Nintendo's arcade ROMs are actually still pretty easy to find on the internet if you know where to look for them. That being said though, I am not going to be providing a link to where you can download a ROM of this particular version of Wrecking Crew though. Again, like I always say in these kinds of videos, Google is your friend. But yeah, I do believe that is where I am going to end things for now. So, that is Versus Wrecking Crew, kind of like a pared-down version of the NES version of Wrecking Crew, and I just want to reiterate, this is in fact the original version of Wrecking Crew. This is the version of Wrecking Crew that Nintendo originally made before they brought it to consoles and turned it into more of a puzzle game. There's really nothing more to say about it. It is definitely a really simplistic game, and it was clearly designed to be played with another person and not against a computer opponent, because the computer opponent just acts really weird most of the time. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that little look back at one of Nintendo's lesser known games. Yeah, and just in case you're curious as to what the arcade version is supposed to look like with its dual screens, I'm actually going to show you that right now. So this right here is what the arcade version is actually supposed to look like. As you can see, there are two screens running simultaneously, and it's basically like two different instances of the game because they're not synced up to each other whatsoever. Yeah, I don't exactly know how you'd be playing this simultaneously with another person though, if they're not even synced up. I don't know how exactly that would work. I don't know, maybe there's something that I'm missing here, but yeah, this is how the game is actually supposed to look like. But because I was playing this in one player only, I decided to crop it out so that you would just see one screen and not like both of them, because I mean, admittedly, this display looks pretty awkward. Of course, you would just be playing the NES version on one single screen, and I do believe the NES version had two-player support as well. So you would just be playing two players on one screen, which again just begs the question, what was even the point of having this whole setup? I mean, the NES version of Wrecking Crew has two players and just one screen, but the arcade version has two players and two screens. I don't get it, at all. Yeah, and just in case you're wondering how exactly I cropped this, thankfully, Mayhem actually has it has a setting right here called Dual Over Under, so if I want to stack the screens vertically on top of each other, I can do that as well, and that's what this looks like right here. This is what Dual Over Under looks like. So by orienting the screens like this, I'm just able to crop out, like, one of the screens. Like, I can show you what this looks like on OBS. Like, yeah, you can see that I'm basically just, yeah, just zooming it in like this, essentially. And there you go, I'm just showing one screen now. Yeah, so that's basically how I was able to, set this whole thing up. I was kind of worried that this would end up looking a lot more scuffed than, I wanted it to, but it actually looked pretty decent. At least in my opinion, it looked pretty decent, so yeah, I wasn't exactly sure how I was gonna set this up, but MAME comes to the rescue because it turns out there's a lot of different video options that you can enable here, so Dual Over Under definitely saved me for sure. Anyway, that's where I'm gonna leave things for now. I don't really have any more that I wish to discuss regarding Wrecking Crew or any of its other ports. I mean, this game did also eventually come out for the Famicom Disk System and even the Game Boy Advance, but those ports were only released in Japan. I don't believe that this game is available on Nintendo Switch Online, so if you are planning on getting Nintendo Switch Online, well, this is not one of the games that you're going to be playing on it, and I'm not sure if it's one of the games that anyone would want to be playing on this. But yeah, I just thought this would be an interesting look back on one of the more obscure Nintendo games starring Mario and Luigi, because again, this is still technically a Mario game. It has Mario and Luigi as playable characters. It's also one of the very rare Mario games where Mario and Luigi can't actually jump, but it is implied that the reason why they can't jump is because they're carrying heavy hammers, which I guess makes sense. So there you go, I have nothing more to say, the video is done, there's not going to be a link in the description to where you can download this because, again, it's a ROM file and I don't want to get in legal trouble, so that's it, I'm ending it here. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I will see you in the next video I make. Later!